Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another Office Hours. Today, we've got a great one for you. I want to say it's called the RCM Leadership That Gets Results in Coding Teams. That's the title. And whether you're running a team, building one, or thinking about what makes a good coding operation really work, you're going to walk away from here with some ideas that you can use right away. So I'm joined today by Jessica Watson, who is our facility coding manager here at Infinix. Jessica's been leading a coding or our coding teams through all kinds of challenges. You name it, remote work, evolving payer demands, that's always a big one, complex facility coding environments, you name it. So she knows how to drive accuracy and performance while keeping her team engaged and supported. And we're going to learn a lot from her today. So Jessica, thanks so much for being here with us today. Just want to see if you can say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. Like Stuart said, I'm Jessica Watson, and I've been in the industry since 2015. So happy to be
Nice,
here.
nice. So lots of experience. Yeah, I think nowadays it's experience really matters, especially when leading coding teams. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We'll cover how to lead coding teams effectively in today's revenue cycle environment, what works, what doesn't, how to avoid burnout in particular. It's a big problem in today's world, and how to balance productivity with accuracy as well as culture. Culture is a big part of this. So Jessica's going to share some of the things that she's seen work on the ground, everything from building trust to tracking pitfalls before they become denials. So as always, I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions while we're going, just drop them in the Q&A. We'll leave time at the end. We'll try to leave time at the end. You never know where we'll go to take as many of those as you can. And also, I always say this is any comments, not just questions, but if you have any insights of your own, if you want to give any feedback based on what we're saying in this session, please drop that in there as well. So with that, Jessica, let's get things rolling. Why don't we start with a little look behind the scenes? What does your role as a facility coding manager here at Infinix look like day to day? And what's been unique about leading a fully remote team?
So my day-to-day role is basically I make sure that everybody's hitting productivity numbers. I watch the high dollar accounts, match that up against the date of services, make sure we don't get too far behind on anything. Keep on top of workflows, design more workflows, watch my coders, try to streamline what they're doing and how they're getting to the information. And particularly, we just went into a new system with one of the clients we're working with right now. So that's been a huge implementation. Looking for uncoded encounters, they always seem to kind of hang out there, and just basically staying on top of the money, watching the money go down, the encounters go out the door, all the while making sure my coders are being productive and accurate.
Mhm, mhm. So you're directing traffic, basically, is what it sounds
Yeah,
like.
a
So
lot of moving parts.
a lot of moving parts. Yeah, and so everybody thinks of coding, they think of it from this prospect of, oh, it's just taking a medical record and making it, turning it into codes. Have a whole lot to say about that, I'm sure, in this session too. But it's more than that. What you just described doesn't exactly fit what people's perception of coding is, or particularly a coding manager. And it's like, well, but it's a key component to the whole RCM. And I've always said coding is a language that carriers use to understand what happened at the encounter or at the stay, so to speak, the hospital stay. And if you don't get that right, it's going to be lost in translation. So I like to call it like translators, like gatekeepers, if you will, for revenue. So that's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
one of the biggest challenges in coding leadership, I'm sure, is balancing that productivity with everything that you've just stated you have going on, and really balancing that with accuracy. There's this,
Mhm.
everybody wants to get the claim out fast. Sometimes you can sacrifice speed or sacrifice accuracy for speed. Sometimes you can sacrifice speed for accuracy. So how do you set those expectations without creating the burnout or fear of metrics, so to speak? I like that. I like that. Fear of metrics.
Sure. So my method is I call it the power of three because there's three pieces to it because I want my coders to be productive, but I want them to be accurate, but I also want them to spend their day in the system, meaning a fast coder can be productive, but only put in a half a day's work. So
Mhm.
that's basically time stealing if we do that. So I really try to push different metrics for my coders. If I have a faster coder, I'm starting to set up different productivity expectations for them. I try to keep them moving around to different queues. It kind of keeps them on top of their game. Um, if you don't use it, you lose it, the knowledge a little bit. So if I train somebody in one queue, say the ED, then I put them in same day surgery. I want them to keep going back to those places so that they're fresh on the knowledge. They can code wherever I need them to. But really, it's a balancing act of all three of those pieces with the productivity, the accuracy, and then just making sure that they're giving me a full day's work, which is a challenge with remote coding.
Yeah, I can only imagine because you just got to make sure there is that balance of, you want to give people the freedom to do their work, but monitoring them to make sure they're doing their work. It's almost like, do we trust them? It's like this barrier of trust. And certainly you do because you hired them. If you hire someone, certainly you trust them, but you still have to, there has to, I guess what I'm saying is accountability. So you're
Right.
building in that accountability in there to make sure everyone is doing their work. Just kind of throwing this in here, but I know that there's a company that I've, have worked with in a past life. I didn't work for them, but worked with them, but they enhance, coding, coders to help do their work. And they have, an acronym. It's called EPH. So encounters per hour. So that
Mhm.
was a metric that they use. I don't know if you're familiar with such a metric, or maybe if there's a similar metric where y'all measure, how many encounters per hour is the expectation, how many encounters per hour are they supposed to meet, and I'm sure that kind
Right.
of balances, it helps balance things out. Are there any other metrics? If you want to, I know I'm throwing you a curveball, but I'm just saying if you want to kind of speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So I like to, right now, I'm working a lot in the Epic system. So in there, I just lean on their reporting. If there's a coder that is hitting productivity numbers, but their activity in the system is way less than what it should be, less than a full day's work, then it's something that I reach out and kind of talk to them and kind of push their numbers a little bit because I know they can do more.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I'm also auditing their charts and making sure that they're accurate with going so fast also, because that's a big component of it all. So just lean on, different systems. Cerner, everybody's had their different reporting tools that they have in their system. So I just really learn those and dive into learning how to read those reports and then use it for the coder's benefit.
Right, right. So you're able to pinpoint which ones you should audit, perhaps. And you've been doing this a long time. You
Yep.
probably have an eye of, a good idea, just secondhand on just comes to you naturally now, right?
Yeah,
Kind of
there's
know.
fast coding and then there's too fast coding. And
Right, right.
every queue, every type of encounter takes different skill set, different time. So it's something that some coders, they hear productivity and they really just push those numbers and they sacrifice accuracy. So that's something that as a manager I have to stay on top of and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to, they're meeting their numbers, but they're not just throwing things out the door that aren't coded right.
All right, exactly. So metrics matter, and I know we may get into that accuracy a little bit later, but you had mentioned remote culture, remote coding, so to
Mhm.
speak. So let's dive into that a little bit with remote culture. So what tools and rhythms help your coders stay connected, and also that they have confidence and can collaborate even with each other when they're not in the same office? I mean, obviously they collaborate with you, and sometimes they may have to collaborate with, the providers as well. But just, tell us how that looks like.
Sure. So, unfortunately, since we've been in the Epic system, I haven't been able to have as many meetings with my teams as normal, but we're getting back into that. We've been live now for a few months with this client. So, just getting back to the weekly meetings, giving everybody kind of a chance to talk, ask questions during those meetings. But I also encourage small groups. If I have two coders in a queue, I utilize my resources and I put them together in Teams chats and they can converse back and forth. And I encourage them to talk about things, think through things together, ask questions. And and a lot of it too, I always tell my coders, I'm okay with being wrong. Coding is kind of subjective sometimes, not fully, but I could see it a different way than they do. And so we just, have those conversations, jump on a call and let's work through it together and figure out the right codes that need to be put on things. And
Right,
um,
right.
they worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I think that's key because from my experience, you have maybe one or two people that have all this tribal knowledge, and then
Yeah,
there's everybody else, right? And so and they may know exactly what to do based on their experience. They've been there a long time, and then sometimes that knowledge is just not shared. So what you just stated is extremely helpful, in my opinion, even in those small teams that you described. It's just very crucial. I mean, you have one person who does it all, but whatever happens, I'm certainly when they go on PTO, people would scramble.
right.
But what if, God forbid anything happens to them or whatever, it's if they go and get another opportunity, somewhere else, and then you're really left scrambling. So what I guess that cross training that you were talking about is so
Mhm.
important. And even goes back to the previous comment you said with the other question was making sure that they are keeping those skills sharp and working in different queues in different areas. So I imagine swapping them around like that also is extremely important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And not every coder can function in different areas. So that's kind of also key is learning how they code, learning their learning styles, and then also putting them in the best fit. I have some coders that like to be in one area and some coders that like to bounce around. And personally, I like to bounce around. So I really identify, can pick up those type of coders pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really key to understanding how they work best to make the team really cohesive and successful. And I think that keeps them from burning out. Give them a new task and put them in different areas and working with different people. It's not the same old thing. I've had previous managers previously before coming to Infinix that unfortunately, I went to them and I said, I work best in several different areas, just keep me moving. And they're like, no, we're going to put you in one area. And so I was super productive, but I wasn't spending enough time in the system. So being a coder myself, I kind of can pinpoint, when maybe they're cheating the system a little bit, and kind of try to avoid that so that we get the most out of our coding team. But and listening to my coders as well. That's a big thing. Giving them that voice to say, "Hey, I think you're telling us to do this wrong," or I see, another coder that's maybe doing something a little bit off and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a village.
Yes, I'd imagine it takes the whole team, that's for sure. Of course, then you mentioned that I like when you said, I like to, let them know that I'm not always right, or sometimes I'm wrong. And you mentioned, coders often spot patterns that leadership misses, like
Yep.
denial trends or ambiguous orders. So how do you create a safe space for that feedback to flow upward? Because some people feel like, I'm not gonna ruffle any feathers. I'm not gonna rock the boat. If I go to the boss and say, I see a problem here.
Yeah. Just reminding them in meetings, I'm okay with being wrong if you guys see it different, if they're the ones, even though I'm auditing, I try to audit about 25 charts per coder per week myself. But that doesn't mean I'm going to pick up a documentation error or pattern that keeps happening. So when the coders bring me something like Dr. So and so keeps, leaving his H&Ps blank or not signing, I
Mhm.
give them that voice and then I take that to the next step and then I tell them the resolution. In the past, I've had managers that just didn't listen or nothing happened when you tell them things like that. But just keeping those lines of communication open as much as possible. Sometimes it does get busy with meetings and things like that. But I always try to get back to the team and I really listen to them and what they're telling me because they're the ones that are seeing more charts per day than I do.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I have
Yeah.
to take them, look at what they're telling me and really dive into when they're reporting an issue so that we can get the main focus is get the claims out the door as quick as possible and not have those delays because we're waiting on something or I've even had team members that I've taken stuff back to clients because the maybe the doctor is not being very specific in certain areas, and we think that we can get a higher E&M level if they just kind of revamp that, put a few more sentences in there, and we just give them kind of some guidelines and some guidance. And
Mhm.
when they take it, it's pretty successful. And then, we get those higher E&M levels for them and can turn around things, more positive than what they had. So,
Right, right. That's one thing that will never go away is educating physicians on documentation. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. You're kind of, singing, the same hymn book that I sing from because I was kind of brought up on documentation, E&M
yeah,
coding, and I can just remember like, oh, why don't they ever get it right? And someone who was my mentor said, oh, they're never going to get it right. You just have to keep reminding them, keep reminding them, and keep reminding them. But it's true. I mean, it's true today. And it doesn't matter what technology you throw at it. Um, it
yeah,
seems, with EHRs, we're going to solve that problem, other than paper charts. And now AI is going to solve that problem. And so I may ask you a question about AI a little later, but it's almost like they're just not never going to get it. So with that in mind, I'm going to throw another curveball, but it's kind of looking at the fact that they're probably coming to you to spot these patterns because they need some clout behind going to perhaps a provider query. And or I just did a podcast um, that I think is going to air this week where for our revenue cycle optimized podcast, and the subject was all about chart lag, not charge lag, but chart lag, and it was all about how
mhm,
what are the things that keep the chart from moving? What are the things that people don't really measure, but delays the claim from going out the door? And it's often this lack of signature, right?
yeah,
Or lack of clear documentation, ambiguity, going after not having provider queries respond in a timely manner. And why do you even need a provider query, right? So I mean, we all know that there are some providers write War and Peace, some providers just write, two or three sentences. Um, but again, it goes back to that coder's job to translate, but it can be challenging. It can be very challenging. So just looking at that from that standpoint, is that where you mediate on behalf of the coders, where sometimes you have to step in and go, look, they're having a hard time with you. Can you please, respond to this query? That's just an example.
yeah. On the facility side, it's a little bit different than say on the PB side. It's a little bit less hands-on with the doctors, but I do take it back to the client. And they have representatives, and usually we get pretty good results. We've had, doctors that don't do maybe their ED notes on time, and then, we push the facility to kind of work on that a little bit. And because it just holds up the whole process when we're just waiting on an ED note that should be there and they just have to sign off on it really quickly.
Mhm.
We work hand in hand with the CDI side for the inpatient encounters, and they deal a lot one-on-one with some of those physicians and getting those queries for us. We ask them to do it, and they really it's a team effort with who we're working with right now with between CDI and then the facility itself. So I'm thankful that I don't have to deal one-on-one a lot with some of those physicians,
Mhm.
just
Right.
because it can be hard to navigate some of those conversations. Nobody likes to be told they should do something different or wrong. Maybe they're doing something wrong. But when we
Mhm.
do have to take things back to the client, so far it's been received really, really well. And
Yeah.
I actually got a lot of input into building the Epic system for a client, and that was really neat to see because I said I'd like to see this be a little bit longer, or I'd like this. So it got a really good coding perspective into their system, which kind of helps on a lot of their forms that they're using and stuff that's already in the system.
Nice, nice. Yeah. So you mentioned also, the importance of listening. I'm a big advocate of that. I think the fine art of listening is a lost art these days because everyone's in such a hurry to get the next thing. You kind of hear parts of it. You don't really truly, and listening's more than just hearing. It's actually comprehending and understanding, right, what the person's going through. So for leaders listening today, what's the one thing you think most coding managers overlook or get wrong when it comes to RCM team performance?
Sure. I think a big one is just focusing on just the productivity. I think you can get more from your coders when you tailor their expectations. Um, I always started the baseline of the HEMA guidelines. It says it should be this chart. Once you get into different systems, they have their own set of standards that say, it should be this. But don't be afraid to push those productivity numbers past the standard expectation because we're not all standard. Really tailor it per coder, learn how they work best, learn what makes them happy, listen to them when they're bringing you issues, even if you don't think it's an issue, still, validate it so they feel comfortable coming to you with things that they're seeing.
Hmm.
Um, and the biggest thing too that I think a lot of as a coding manager, I wasn't quite ready for this part when it came up. But just be prepared for the downside of working with coders, and that is some people aren't sitting at their desks all day, so you have to learn the tools that they're using to be active in the system,
Hmm.
and just be ready to identify that and be up on the trends. There's a big trend where people are working two jobs at one time. It's great. I don't think my brain can wrap around that, but
Yeah, no way.
And that's why you really have to stay. I don't like the word micromanaging, and I don't feel like I do that up front, but in the back end, you really do have to dive into all those resources of reporting that you have and make sure that your team is engaged for the full time and doing things right. So I never thought about getting a second job when I was at my first job, like
Yeah, I know.
at the
One,
same time.
I've had two jobs before, but I was very, very young and they weren't
Yeah.
complex jobs.
Right. Yeah. And
Right,
one started and ended, and then the next one began and
right,
ended, but
right,
not
right. Not
simultaneously.
at the same time. Exactly. I can relate to that. So that's all the questions that I have. So I'm going to turn it over to our Q&A with our audience, and I'm just going to check real quick in the Q&A, see if there's any questions we have there. That please feel free to enter some questions or comments, like I said earlier. So we do have a couple here, Jessica, and one. I guess I get this, but how do you manage continuing education for coders when payer rules and documentation standards change so frequently? And they really do change sometimes
Yeah.
without even telling you they've changed.
A lot of that I feel also falls to the coder themselves. They need to keep up with their credentials. They need to be reading all those that pertain to their job areas that they're working. But I also try to, when I get the information, to put it out to the team to give updates, encourage webinars that I think that are going to be useful to the team. It's something that I'd like to implement more this year as we go on and as we settle into the new system. We also need to just make sure some companies provide, and I think it's an asset if they do, your membership fees. Uh, but if you have a team of coders that you're paying for their memberships and they're not utilizing those webinars, or you're not giving them maybe a little bit of time to utilize the resources that are on those websites, I think that's kind of the downfall of it. So I think, if you're offering things to your coders to keep up, or at least, doing their yearly memberships, make sure that they're engaged and they're getting that information. And most coders are self starters. We're working on our own in our homes. So it's not a huge problem, I think, getting them going on using those resources that they have.
Right, right. Because I know reading the Federal Register is such fun stuff. I mean, if you really, I mean, if you really want to get deep into some entertainment, just pick up with the Federal Register and start reading. Of course, and anyone who's ever done that understands exactly what I'm saying. So, um, it can be tedious, but it's more than just that. I mean, to your point, it's like, yes, you have to be engaging. You have to be, don't rely on leadership to come to you and say, hey, here's a program. And I was recently at HealthCon AAPC, even did a presentation there, and this past year, and was just amazed at how that organization has evolved. And now it's less, it's well, it's still coding classes for CEUs, but also professional, how to, your professional outlook, how you, improve from a professional standpoint, how you have this professional presence. And it just went through, they had classes on that too that were offering CEUs. Um, does that have anything to do with coding? Not directly, but it definitely helps the performance of that coder because they feel more confident. They understand exactly what they need to do. It kind of helps them be that self-starters, like you said, because coders are self-starters, and I find that the takeaway from that is that they really see themselves as a key part of the revenue cycle process.
Yeah, it all starts with coding, and if
Yep.
we do it right and we get it right the first time, it can miss edits, it can miss everything and go straight out to billing and
Right.
on quicker. So
Exactly. So we do have another question. What advice would you give to a new manager? Um, just don't do it. No, just kidding. What advice would you give to a new manager who just inherited a remote coding team that's performing on accuracy or TAT?
yeah. First thing I would do, because that's kind of the situation a little bit that I came into was we had a lot of coders and didn't have a lot of productivity. So the first thing I worked on was standard productivity across the board. And then that's when you can pick apart and dive in and get things more critiqued per the coder and per the queue. But you have to stay on top of that productivity and you have to have those hard conversations. One thing I like to do is randomly call my team and see what they're doing and just kind of pop in and make sure that they're there. But be ready to have the people that want to work and the people that don't want to work. And be ready to move that around, as quick as possible. You can give them all the information and all the opportunity, but it's up to them since they're the ones sitting at home and not in an office. It's up to them to really either choose to listen and do the work or not. I ran in the beginning a lot of people that I was just really floored. We say, "Hey, you're not working, or you're not, we need you to do this," and they still wouldn't. So
Mhm.
it's just one of those things you just got to move on from them really quickly. And because of that, I was really able to tailor down my team and get a really good group of coders on with
Yeah,
us.
yeah. It's almost like you're fine tuning, calibrating, the team.
Yeah,
And you have to have some hard decisions sometimes, to make that happen because ultimately, first of all, the manager's accountable for the
yeah,
productivity of the entire team, but the whole team's accountable. And then you have your top performers or the people that are actually performing well, doing their job, and the others, it can create a problem, right? If you're kind
yeah.
of overlooking that behavior. So, yeah, I get that. That's just part of being a manager, part of being a manager.
Yeah. And then really setting once your team settles in and they're hitting those productivity goals, if you have a coder and say they're in labs and your productivity is 120 per day and they hit 122 every day, well then that's a big red flag. You need to move them around, you need to give them more. You
Right.
need to set different standards. Push them in other areas, but I think a lot of coding managers are afraid to push past the standard productivity rates and that and you absolutely can, and it's something that if my team's watching right now they'll be a little surprised, but we've got some big things coming in the next couple weeks. So
Oh, nice, nice. Now they're all wondering, oh, what is she talking about? What is she talking about? So,
tailored productivity standards coming
right,
there.
exactly, exactly. And so just one last comment. I know the world's all abuzz about AI. And and even when I was at HealthCon, I ran around the whole conference asking people and recording it, hey, what do you think about AI? And and obviously here in Infinix, we leverage AI agents a lot into what we do for our clients, and also offer them as platforms directly to clients. So, but AI, I think, has its place in tools, and for coding, I know that some of the coding technology through the years just didn't quite get it right, but there are some that do good. It really depends upon, like earlier, I was talking about the encounter per hour for that vendor that actually It's helping improve, where you see that you talk about
Mhm.
standard where they're supposed to be maybe 120 encounters or stays. They're actually escalating it to 200 and above, per hour, just using certain technology. It's a form of AI, but it's not necessarily doing the coding. It's just making sure that the coding, everything's in place. Why do you have to touch something that's right? Right? We
Right.
only want to look at what's wrong. So I don't know. I just wanted to see if you had a take on that in general.
Sure. I don't have a lot of experience with the AI things that are kind of going in place. Right now, we're basically working with a system that is coding things, some of the encounters automatically, but the facility's dropping maybe the charges on things. And so we see maybe modifiers missing, and then we're seeing some of the things coded wrong, wrong charges. And so for our unique situation with the client we're on right now, um, if it was trained professionals that know you can't put this with this and
Mhm.
putting the information into the system for it to grab, I think it would work great. But there's a little, it depends on where it's pulling the information from for those encounters. And I think AI is kind of doing a little bit better job of that. But there's some technologies out there that maybe, we just need to make sure that things are on the record right, maybe before it goes out the door, because if it gets stopped in billing denials, then we're not really capturing that money's going out the door, but it's not any faster because it's getting held up in a huge denial, or
Right, right.
maybe causing some red flags for some audits or something like that. But my experience is very limited in that so far.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Yeah, and so there's all types of AI that can be deployed within that process, but we definitely want to make sure it's done correctly the first time
Yeah.
because it doesn't make sense to rework a claim in the form of a denial because now you're just
Yeah.
spending more money and you're getting paid much later, probably much less
Yeah.
anticipated. So awesome. Well, Jessica, I want to thank you for being with us today. This was an awesome conversation. You'll probably be back for more later. We'll invite you again. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for your time.
Yes, and I want to thank everyone who is attending for this episode of Office Hours. Stay tuned, and you'll see in next week's Office Hours is something that's going to be good, really good as well. So looking forward to seeing everyone there next time. So everyone have a fabulous day.